Right, it is Tuesday. We are on our way for the first time. We're in the Uber right now with all our stuff. By now, you guys have probably seen the tweet that we're going to be filming today. I wrote a couple of days ago and was hoping Ian would be fine with it. A little nervous to see how they respond to us being there. This is really unprecedented for not just us, but them as well. They've never let anybody have the access we're going to have. We're hoping they're going to take us behind the scenes. We'll have to sign NDAs because obviously they'll be working on late Dragonflight stuff and maybe even the next expansion as well. So one of the things is we noticed maybe a little nerves getting closer with the people we're going to be interviewing. They're not trained to be in front of camera and they might be a little worried about what some people might say with such long form discussions as we're having. But honestly, the conversations we've had in the last day or so, everyone seems really excited to do this and to show the change that's happened at Blizzard, which is our role right now is what has changed. What happened? We know what happened. All the allegations. The Shadowlands not doing very well, and their previous expansions kind of going in a downhill trend, and now they seem to have changed their entire philosophy. So hopefully we can dig into what caused that, other than just financials and trying to get sub numbers up. How did they change their entire approach to the game? So that's what we're interested in. I hope it goes well. We're getting to meet so many cool people, and higher ups, like serious execs. So fingers crossed, guys. I'm on tenterhooks.
The sheer number of cases that came out at that point, I was like, oh my god.
I just want to be hype about it again.
We're missing something big here, and we're failing.
Time to give up on World of Warcraft.
Almost a year ago, after 10 years of making nearly daily World of Warcraft content, decided that I could no longer do it. My love of the game, my passion of the game, and my enjoyment of the game had been reduced to absolute zero. Dragonflight starts coming, and one of the messages I receive is they have changed practically everything that I disliked about the game. So, what changed? Blizzard suffered through heavy issues during COVID-19 and then a spate of sexual allegations and lawsuits which entirely disrupted the upper management. That's a lot that's happened. What's really changed? So, we decided we would go and find out properly. If I was going to play this game again, enjoy this game and make content for this game again, I need to know the real truth. So we sent a message to Blizzard. We're not looking for money. In fact, we have paid to be here. That's right. This is not a marketing scheme. This is nothing that Blizzard has organized. They haven't asked me to come here. We asked them. We said, we will pay for it. We will come there. All we ask for is a bit of your time and sitting down properly. Over the years, I've done several interviews with Blizzard employees from the top brass, but always under limitations. Being in front of a live Twitch stream, being in front of prepared questions or general guidelines of the things we're going to talk about. And I don't want any of that today. And Blizzard said yes. They said, absolutely. We will give you a week on our campus. We will give you unprecedented, unfiltered access to our facilities and to what is going on. So as you can see, guys, I am here. I am standing on the Blizzard campus in front of the famous orc statue, and I have been and met absolutely everybody. Let's go on this journey and find out what the real truth is. First of all, let's sit down with two of the big guns. You probably haven't seen these outside of major announcements and don't know who they are, but they are very big deals. First, we're going to sit down with Holly Longdale. Holly joined in 2020 to take over the Classic team. She has so much MMO experience, it's ridiculous. She spent nearly 10 years alone on EverQuest 2 getting their Classic game up and running, and she's now the Vice President of all of World of Warcraft. With her, John Hight. John's been in the game since 1993. He's worked on video game franchises you guys probably love, like God of War, Command & Conquer Red Alert. He literally, and I mean this, wrote the book on how to create video games. He was a professor for years and joined the World of Warcraft team in 2011. He is now in charge of Warcraft, not just World of Warcraft, all of Warcraft. I couldn't miss the opportunity while I had these two here to find out how Classic came about and how it's probably influencing Dragonflight.
I mean, Classic seems to have been a runaway success. Like the meme of it being, you think you want it, but you don't.
Yeah.
And now it's like...
Oh, we want it.
We thought you didn't, but you did.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
I mean, how was that decision come to at the time? Like, what made the change there with that?
That we actually made Classic?
Yeah, that you were like, okay, they keep asking, we're going to do it.
Honestly, yeah, we didn't think it was going to be financially even necessarily a great decision as much as it was our fans are really asking for this. Some of our most devoted fans are asking for this. And it really was. When we say it was a love letter, it was a love letter. We justified it in the, hey, we do this. It's going to make our fans super happy. And, we're going to learn a lot in the process. But, I mean, come on. How many games have gone back and recreated that? And I did that on God of War, right?
Yep.
God of War 1 and 2 and up-resed them. But the game's still live. It's like you can still play those areas in modern. So going back and recreating that original experience, I don't think that's ever been done before.
I mean, RuneScape's tried. Old school RuneScape but they had to accept a lot of changes.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here with doing our EverQuest Classic servers. This WoW is a whole different
animal.
Yeah.
What challenges did you meet then that you weren't expecting, I guess?
With Classic?
Yeah, for sure.
Numbers. Just vast.
Just the sheer amount of people playing it.
Numbers. Yeah, and players never do what you expect them to, like ever.
That's like every MMO lesson ever, right? Is they're like ants, they just crawl across the planet.
But that's one of the beauties of it is, we're re-exploring and relearning, Classic. Even as much time and effort is spent in the archaeology of, does it match what the original game was like? But when players interact with it now, the skill that they have, the knowledge, that some of them have done it before, all these like really interesting little edge cases and stuff that they find, and it's a day-to-day, wow, look what they figured out. It was based on...
Did you expect it to just be like everyone's going to play it for like a month? Was that your expectation?
Kind of. I mean, I remember our original estimates, and it was kind of funny because we totally underestimated the number of realms we were going to have, and I can remember arguing with one of our regions, it was like very conservative and like, we're only going to need this. And we'd flown out there and we're like, no, we think based on our estimates in North America, you're probably going to want to have more than that within, and God bless the Classic team, but like literally within weeks, they had to spin up 10 times our estimate.
Yeah. Almost like the original WoW.
To handle it.
It's almost like you recreate that back-end experience.
Except we had the technology this time. Then it was like, we don't have the hardware. What do we do? I don't know. Go up to Fry's.
Literally belt strapping things together. Plug it in. Go. But it's been... I'm curious what you guys have learned from that, from what the players are doing in Classic that's now coming into the retail game. Like you were like... Yeah, we should bring that into the retail.
You're seeing it, yeah. I mean, that's the exciting thing is Classic brought back these conversations about talent trees, like revamping talents. How much do you love spending your points and experimenting with your class? Or if that was what your memory is, that's my memory of Classic or of Vanilla. And so the team recognized that. They're always taking the pulse, too. It's like players really love that. And professions. I think the teams really wanted for a long time to be able to focus on professions as well. But even how we are looking at content, right? So more, in Vanilla or Classic, there's the exploration factor. It felt less guided, and the team's taken that to heart too. And you'll see elements of that in Dragonflight as well. It's a really wonderful exploration about, where are we now and where are we going to go in the future, and kind of taking stock and listening to the community. And it's pretty incredible to see it coming through in Dragonflight.
Yeah, I think there's social interaction, in
so
Classic,
much.
You had to, just to get through stuff, you had to make friends, and we were all in this together. I played in the beta, and I played, WoW. I played for 18 years.
What's the biggest change you've seen in players? Because I talk about like what idyllic MMOs, what would if I was creating an MMO, what it would look like, and I focus so much on the people because I can't think of an MMO being anywhere what I would consider great without the people you play with. I think about my guild more than what's this feature, what's this content. But we're growing loud voice that I've seen across many MMOs now. We're talking to so many MMO companies, a lot of players who just want the solo experience, and their biggest fear is actually other people. Which blows my mind because I was like, I love the people so much, even the bad ones, because that's a moment. I think about those moments with the bad people. And what's the biggest change you've seen in
gamers
I
in
think
general.
I think you've actually identified one of the challenges that we face with World of Warcraft is we know that a lot of players just want to come in, have some fun, know that, there's things for them to do, and not have the pressure of having to interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But then they want to, and then when they have that chance encounter, where someone happens to be farming the same thing and you just got killed 3 times and, okay, let's join in a group together. We did it. We killed it together. Awesome. That's cool. Or meeting, that set of friends that you start running dungeons with, or you start doing a raid with, and enjoying some of that group content that we've created. Those are some of the best moments in the game.
Yep.
Like, I remember it was Christmas a few years back when we had the hive mind, mount. It was this crazy set of things that you had to do to unlock it. And I did this with a completely random set of people, 4 people I didn't even know. We went through all of it. I had all the monocles. We got this thing, and we were all like high-fiving each other. And I got to put them on my friends list. And I actually kept in contact with the one for a couple months after that.
Yeah.
But those moments are so cool. And I think, we try to have experiences like that, where you no pressure. You can play by yourself if you want to. And I think there's something actually kind of comforting knowing that while I'm wandering around doing my solo thing, working on one of my alts or whatever, that there's thousands of other people around there, and I can see them doing their thing. And I think that's a really fun part of the game. It reminds me that I'm not just doing this all by myself.
Like I said before, what does it mean for Azeroth to feel alive, day to day, week to week, and ongoing? And how do we evolve that? And to me, I geek out. We all geek out about all this stuff about how do we evolve? We are committed to WoW evolving and delivering more for players and being mindful of the community. So when you're talking about how gamers have changed, we have people like you, people we are a living, breathing community, not just in Azeroth, but outside it as well. And really, advancing our thinking about what does it mean for all of us as a community around World of Warcraft. So we're thinking really big, and then also, what's going to bring players along, week to week, month to month, and make sure that, we're serving our community who want to live there.
This is why this trip is so important. Sitting down with these guys, finding out how Classic came about and how it's going to influence Dragonflight, so amazing. But one of the things I'm worried about with coming here is I actually don't know how everybody plays World of Warcraft. I think back to my day to day, from vanilla all the way up until the end, and the sheer amount of mandatory content that has been added to the game over the years has just grown exponentially, including several systems which are just infinite in time. Now, of course, mandatory is a subjective thing. If you break it down, everything is optional. But if you wanted a character wearing the current gear, the latest legendaries, whatever it might be, your commitment to the game has massively increased, even doing content that perhaps you don't like simply because you have to. Torghast would be a great example of that. But the thing is, I actually don't know whether people like doing that. Nobody does except them. So let's sit down with Ian and try and find out how people spend their time in Azeroth. But I know how you guys spend your time, and that's by picking up a display. Display are proudly sponsoring this video so we could take all our equipment, pack up our staff, and fly across the world in order to speak to Blizzard on your behalf. If you like this and you want to see more of this, especially check out part 2 of this video where we're going to be looking at how World of Warcraft is made, then why not consider picking up a display? And using our link down below, you can get up to a massive 44% off your display order. And we have these amazing official World of Warcraft displays that you can pick up in time for Dragonflight as well. So if you're looking for some cool art that's very, very easy to put up, you can swap them around, you can have multiple of them, why not consider display and help us out? And maybe we can go and visit some other people you'd like us to talk to as well. Now let's talk to Ian. I mean, you serve so many different player types, right? I mean, I'm not sure how your metrics work, but one of the questions, because I think it's really tough when you're out there and you're not just a content creator, but you're anybody. The vast majority is a horrible, horrific term that gets thrown around all the time in reference to World of Warcraft. This is what the vast majority likes. What do people actually do in the game? Because we don't know.
I mean, everything. Honestly, I mean, I think that's one of the quirks of WoW. It's part of the magic of WoW. It's part of what makes designing for WoW really challenging at times. I think you could take a dozen people all of whom would say WoW is their primary game. It's one of their favorite games, it's a game they play a ton. You could sit them around a table and have them talk about what they do in the game and why they like it. And it could sound like they're describing 12 different games or experiences that would be foreign to the others. It really is everything from the, completionist solo collector to the casual PvPer who just queues Battlegrounds all weekend, to the hardcore PvPer who wants to push high rating, to the Mythic Plus focus player, to the casual raider, to the hardcore raider, to everything in between. And then all the different Venn diagram overlaps. And all of those people are World of Warcraft players.
Yeah.
And it's and I think the world is, again, as I said earlier, richer because it has all of them in it. But a challenge is, there is no majority, so to speak. It's a collection of many minorities, each of whom have different and sometimes competing interests.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the challenge when it comes to listening, addressing feedback. I think, often the two are a little bit conflated, where hearing feedback should mean, in the eyes of players, and understandably so, well, do what I say. I told you I don't like this. We told you we don't like this, and you didn't change it. Therefore, you're clearly not listening.
Especially if that person believes they're a reasonable person. I'm a reasonable person, and I think you're incorrect. So,
and they are, and they are a reasonable person, and I think it's totally reasonable to want to advocate for the game that you want to play and the play style that you favor. And it's our job to take everybody's concerns into account. It's not a player's concern to take other people's happiness into their account when playing a game. They just want what's going to make it the most fun for them. And so, I think the challenge comes where sometimes those desires are directly conflicting. Where,
you got an example?
Yeah, I think rewards are a clear case.
I'd love to get into this with you.
Yeah, right. It's basically the people who want to do a thing and don't see any value in it and want it to be more rewarding, versus the people who don't want to be forced to do the thing and want it to stay not rewarding at all. Or, should PvE gear have any place in PvP, or vice versa? And to some extent, we can continue to separate out the ecosystems to solve these problems. We can say there's no crossover whatsoever, and you're basically playing a completely different game if you're doing this activity versus that activity. Or to the extent that there's crossover, there's going to be some people who would prefer it weren't that way.
For sure, because, one of the most common things, and I'm guilty of this, and what I could also honestly say after now we're here is, I definitely got to the point where I was so immersed in it and not happy that I definitely went overboard with where I was, which I think is the place you end up with because of a business relation. It's like, ordinarily I just put the game down. I don't know whether it's an internal pressure, and I kind of think this goes back all the way to Nax Ramis, the original one, where it's like, we've invested time and money into this content, but if we don't make them go, they're not going to go. And is that something that's a very real thing?
I think it is a real thing. I think make is maybe too strong a word. But if we don't incentivize it, if we don't make it feel like you are progressing in some way as a result of it, then yeah, people probably won't do it. But I think if we made a zone full of awesome quests that literally offered no rewards, as a hypothetical, right? No experience, no gold, no items, nothing at all, but it's really cool content, most people wouldn't touch it. People who did might touch it once. And that's not to say that, the people who would do it if you're doing it to level, who would do it if you're doing it to get a professional recipe, to whatever, are going to dislike it as a result. But at the end of the day, it is a game that, as part of just the core RPG progression, you have a lot of goals, you're making your numbers go up, you're trying to overcome challenges, you're choosing how to spend your often limited time these days wisely, and you're going to spend that time doing things that are getting you closer to your goals. Maybe like at the end of an expansion when you have no more other goals left, you might go back and chase cosmetics or do things that, you haven't had a chance to just for completionist's sake. But those feel like lost opportunities when there's something out there that has potential that's just underutilized.
Yeah, so where do you draw the line then in being incentivizing it via power? So, it's Torghast throwing the legendary requirement into there, versus this gives you a cool mount. Do you see a distinct difference in participation? Because it's like, they'll just look at it. And I guess a good example of this would actually be challenge modes. And I don't know if you know the participation rates there, which were purely cosmetic rewards, right? That's all that challenge modes gave you, was just a transmog. And did that come across as perhaps a failure? Because not enough people did it?
I don't think challenge modes were a failure, no. Their participation was overall quite low. It got a bit better. I want to say, if I remember, towards the end of Mists, I think we added a decent chunk of Valor for doing challenge mode runs that helped, it helped justify it to people who were just looking to cap their valor for the week. They could at least work towards something else at the same time. But it wasn't seen as a failure because I think it also, as someone who worked very directly on challenge modes, 10 years ago, it wasn't 30 people laboring to make this thing. It was, let's try an extra difficulty. Let's add an extra overlay on the content we're already making. And for the people who got a lot of value out of it and a lot of enjoyment out of it, that felt well worth what we put into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, yeah, you're correct. When we're looking at a major expansion feature like a Torghast, if that were only used by as many people as did missed challenge modes, that would have been seen as a significant failure. It's like we put a ton of time, design resources, engineering, art, iteration into this. If only 8% of our players did it, well then we should have just put those resources into something else that 90% of our players were going to do, because we would have made more of our players happy. At the end of the day, like that's the challenge we're trying to solve. It's we have a finite team, even as we grow, even as we hire, we have this many, person hours of work that can be done this year. How do we deploy those? How do we allocate those in the way that's going to make the most fun for the most players?
Well, one of the things in Dragonflight that's changing is because obviously part of what I would consider the failure of Torghast is that people felt. I know that one of the reasons I stopped playing was I'd log on to my alt, and it was like, okay, I kind of need to farm a legendary, I kind of need to conduits, I kind of need to do this. And as somebody, as I'm sure you're aware, I was a huge champion of Torghast. Like I had a great interview with Morgan about Torghast, and then a lot of it changed. And I was like, this is just killing my soul. It made me very unhappy. It's like, where do you then, is that just a case of looking at alt friendliness for that? Or is this in Dragonflight where you actually have completely smashed this out of the park?
There's a few pieces to that. I think even aside from alt friendliness, which was clearly an issue there, I think that the mandatory weekly loop, the feeling that you have to do this basically every week, essentially forever. And if you miss a week, you're falling behind. And if you put it off, I think that's something that got us thinking a lot about just the player psychology of how people approach mandatory things with expiration date, perceived chores, like that feeling of maybe it's Monday or I guess Tuesday if you're in Europe, and
Wednesday.
the last day of the week is what I'm talking about.
Oh,
so
okay,
Tuesday,
okay.
if you're in
Tuesday,
Europe,
all right.
you had a long day at work, then you went out for dinner with your friends, with your loved ones, whatever. You come home, you're exhausted, and you realize like, oh crap, I haven't done my Torghast run
Been
for
there
the
many
week.
times.
Exactly. Does that make you feel good about World of Warcraft in that moment?
No.
Absolutely not. And so why are we doing that to people? And there's a lot of ways around that. There's, it's catch-up mechanisms so that, if you knew that if you missed it this week, you could just catch up and do 2 next week or whatever, suddenly the psychology is very different. If there's more flexibility and, you can do multiple weeks in a row, or if there's just if it's less of an exclusive reward that only comes from this one source, now suddenly it's fine. Yeah, you're tired tonight, you had fun doing other things, you don't have to log in when you don't want to. But in any case, getting back to Torghast, I think, it was gameplay that was kind of forced to overstay its welcome in a lot of ways because it became something that you had to keep doing for as long as people did. Something that we've tried to pivot to, and I know you mentioned you didn't personally jump in and do Zereth Mortis.
No.
But part of how we approached the activities there, the cipher system, the reputations, the outdoor loop, was basically we're going to give you a couple of weeks of the first couple of weeks. We're going to say, here's frankly a carrot that everyone's going to want. You want to get your second legendary. You want the ability to craft your Unity legendary. That's the second one that you can equip. Doing that's going to take you a couple of weeks of checking out the content. Past that, everything is 100% optional, but you've seen it all. And you can decide whether you like it or not. And if you like it, you've gotten a taste and you can keep going. And if you don't, cool, just never go back. You can ignore it and focus on Mythic Plus, raids, whatever else. And it's a little bit of a middle ground between there being no mandatory power at all, where a lot of people who might have enjoyed the content will never even give it a chance because they're like, well, why am I going to do that? It doesn't give me anything. Or obviously the opposite end of the spectrum where it just becomes an endless thing that you have to keep doing.
So you've taken a pretty hard stance at this. For my playtesting of Dragonflight, this has now become almost a core value of Blizzard going forward, or seemingly, but obviously we're here to talk about it today, is like just no more of that. No more mandatory stuff. And is there like an internal fear then? It's like, are we making stuff now that people aren't going to check out? And are we actually okay with that? Because a lot of games now are going with a more drop-in, drop-out style, and they're still maintaining a sub. Is that something... I mean, this is a risky move you're making in Dragonflight, I think, internally.
I think, so The concept of mandatory, I do think, only applies to a certain portion of the player base. I think it's certainly, high-end competitive players, if there's any advantage that they can get, they have to get it. Well understood. But I think some of what we're also moving away from that lets us, like systems like Renown or Outdoor World Loop, they have powerful rewards from them. You can make, this profession crafting reagents at the end of a Renown tracks that will let you make 402 plus gear that is heroic raid quality. There are other, profession recipes and other things that people will look at and want. But the Mythic Raider who's looking to, push the Hall of Fame isn't going to look at any of those things and say, oh no, this stuff I need from this that I can't get elsewhere, therefore I have to do it.
Yeah.
And some of that is just a product of moving away from the auxiliary, so-called borrowed power alternate advancement systems that we had in the last few expansions. Item level is kind of the simple universal reward. Item level is power, but it's fungible. You can get it from other sources, and it's only as valuable as how it compares to the other stuff you have access to, as opposed to artifact power, essences for your Heart of Azeroth, conduits, all those other things, where it didn't matter how high your eye level was from other content, you had to do this because it was additive.
Mm-hmm. But they were great things, though. It was always the acquisition that was the problem. Like, the actual result was great. I just don't want to farm 50,000 honor in Battlegrounds, Like, the actual system itself. And Azerite Armor in particular is one that I'm deeply upset about. Because I genuinely thought item level is something, and again, it's personal bias, I have no issue with Mr. Does his world quest having the same item level as Mythic Raider. But Azerite Armor seemed to perhaps open the door to be like, well, we can tailor this now to world questing and your experience. We can do it for PvP. We can do it for Mythic Plus, make 5 mana more fun things. It didn't go that way, unfortunately. It was kind of the set bonuses that are out there. But now you are upping the rewards from Mythic Plus, giving those guys natural appeasing people like JB, so you can actually stop raiding for the most part. And is that something that's also changing long term, or is there still an idea of if you're not raiding or doing high-end Mythic Plus or high-end PvP, you should still be a bit lower?
I think there's definitely a little bit of still a spectrum there. Eye level, is if you want 415, 421 type gear in Dragonflight, you're going to need to do high-end PvP, high-end raiding, high-end Mythic Plus. Mm-hmm. We do want outdoor play and certainly professions to be able to push farther into that track than they ever have before. I think at times in the past it's felt like if you were a solo player, well, you kind of capped out at maybe you could get a couple of normal mode raid pieces, and otherwise you were like 30 eye levels behind the Mythic Raider. That's, I think, too large a gap, and something we'd like to close. And that's, really speaking, getting back to some of the earlier conversation about player groups and silent majorities and so forth. We do feel like we have underserved the just solo outdoor focused player who chooses to spend tons and tons of time in World of Warcraft over the years, and they care about progression too. Yep. And I think it's often inaccurate to just assume, oh, well, because you're not trying to push high keys, why do you even need item level? Yeah. At the end of the day, people want the number to go up.
Speaking to Ian this time really opened my eyes to some things, and probably something that you guys have been guilty of as much as me. Why don't the devs listen to us? I spent months, years of my life shouting from the rooftops about things that I considered to be obvious problems, and in many cases did turn out to be. So why is that not getting back to them? Well, it turns out it is. A lot more than you guys probably realize. I spent the entire week with the communications team. Those were the guys who were guiding us around, and they were absolutely incredible. But one of the things they really stressed to us is how much on a weekly basis they gather as much information as possible from the community, reading forums, subreddits, everything, watching videos, and feed that back directly to the people in charge. Some of you might scoff that no they don't, but to clarify this, we spoke to Josh Allen, aka Law. He was with Blizzard for 9 years on the communication team itself, has no reason to lie, and the only reason he left Blizzard was because such a large advancement in his career came up elsewhere. Well, that's one thing we learned from the current community manager team is I was like, what is your day-to-day job then? And we're like, well, we get the patch notes and we sift through those for things that are relevant because a lot of them are bullshit data side things that nobody cares about. And then we put them out to the public. But another part of it is we basically read forums a lot and we gather all that feedback and then we present that to the relevant people to say, this is the kind of community feel right now. Did you feel like you had to filter that for what's relevant, what's not?
Yeah, I mean, there was a significant portion of my time at Blizzard where developer communications was my job. And then my job got reconfigured into being more influencer focused, and everyone was like, why does Lore hate us now? He doesn't talk on the forums anymore. I'm like, well, yes, that's because it's not my job anymore. I'm no longer doing that specific task. There are other people doing that task. Go listen to them. Yeah, there was a lot of that general job and position is not even so much filtering as, I guess, distilling is how I would put it.
Make sure it goes to the right place.
Yeah, make sure it goes to the right place. Make sure that, because a lot of times people will say one thing and what they actually mean is kind of something else. Like, they still mean what they say, obviously, but if it's like, wow, I really hate, like Torghast was a great example where people were like, they really, really loved Torghast in early beta.
Same.
And then when it came out, they were like, wow, I hate Torghast so much. And the takeaway from that was, okay, what changed? And what changed was rewards were added to it. And so then it became a
both,
task.
right? They took rewards out because they had gear and stuff in it originally. It was, it got silly. They took all that out and then they just made you do it for legendaries, which was a complete like 180 on what it originally was.
That's what I mean, though, is like, it's the sort of thing where if Torghast had just remained as like a fun thing that you could go do when you felt like it, I think a lot of people would have enjoyed it because they didn't feel obligated to do it. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you add that obligation, that was the point where it became a chore for people, and it became Torghast at that point. And so that was the sort of thing that like we would look at that sort of feedback and we'd be like, okay, yes, everyone's saying they don't like Torghast, but the majority of the reason we can tell from reading all these different things, and like obviously there's a variety of opinions as well, so it's always a matter of like, what are the biggest pain points to be discovered? Because like occasionally there were some people just like, I don't like the way the Ghost Boys look. I'm like, okay, well that's valid opinion. You're allowed to not like the Ghosty Boys, but that's not what I'm going to take to the development team as like a priority issue that needs fixing.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean by like sometimes people are saying, they just say they hate something, and you have to spend some time figuring out, okay, why do they hate this?
Yeah.
What about it is
I mean,
the
it's no
actual
different
problem?
than YouTube comments. It's like, I fucking hate the sound of his voice. Okay, do you hate my accent? Do you hate the microphone I'm using?
Yeah.
Am I too loud? Am I not normalized properly? Like, try to figure it out, or is it just, you just hate the sound of
It's
my voice?
actually your face. So.
Yeah, which is odd because they specifically said my voice. But now I see in the mirror, it's probably that. But most of the feedback does get back to the guys, to the developers, which obviously one of the biggest complaints in the WoW community is like, they're not listening to us. I've been bitching about this nobody knows better than me is how much I bitched about some of the things in Shadowlands. But they do generally get most of the stuff there, which is surprising when you find out. It's like, yeah, they do. They kind of do.
Yeah, if people are, especially once a point becomes like, well, everyone knows that no one likes this thing. It's like, well, yes, everyone also includes the development team by this point. You can be fairly confident in that. And a lot of times, then the job actually, it gets interesting because a lot of times then the job becomes, okay, what are the other things? Because everyone's talking about this one thing that's really upsetting everyone right now. I don't need to tell the development team for the 30th time that people want to be able to switch between covenants. Like, they know that. I don't need to tell them that again. So what are the other topics that are going on in the community that they're not aware of because everyone's so busy focused talking about this thing? And so making sure that those other bits of feedback and those other smaller conversations still make it to the development team. And that's not like trying to like distract them from the more important conversation or anything. It's just that work doesn't need to be done. But yeah, like, so a lot of time there's been cases in the past where it's like, okay, the team would learn about what the features were in the upcoming expansion, and I would be like, okay, that feature is the one everyone's going to hate. Like, I can tell already what's going on here is people are going to be very upset about this.
So like me with Covenants. I mean, I knew in 2 minutes it was like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah. Covenants was a weird one just because I did not fully understand what it was for a while. Because like, imagine Covenants ended up being a pretty convoluted, especially with like you add in soulbinds and everything as well, ended up being a pretty complicated and convoluted system. Imagine if none of that work had been done yet and someone was just trying to vaguely describe what it was going to be to you. That was the state that I was receiving this information in. So I was like, I don't understand it yet.
At BlizzCon,
I don't know what
right?
it is.
They were announced, and we were like, we all fill in the gaps ourselves.
Yeah.
Right, that's what happens. And I came up with a really thorough RPG storytelling thing and all this, and like, I was like, these are going to be awesome.
That's one of my favorite like pitfalls that I try to warn people about with like every job that I've had and every announcement that I've been a part of, is like, please be sure you're ready to talk about something in a complete sense before you start talking about it. Because if you just throw out like a vague idea of like, here's what this is going to be, we have this idea to build something that's kind of like this, they will fill in the blanks.
Yep.
And they will either, if they're feeling negative, they will fill in the blanks with all negative things about how this is going to be the worst thing that they've ever experienced, and thus they will hate your thing before you've even made it, or they will build it up to be this amazing, like huge, groundbreaking thing like Island Expeditions. This happened with Island Expeditions in BFA, where everyone was like, oh my god, we're going to go to all these islands, and it's going to be like this really cool, like, PvE, but kind of PvP-ish sort of thing, and that's going to be great, and we're unearthing these artifacts, and we're finding all this cool stuff. And then we're like, wait, this is just a thing that you queue for that's like...
It gives you artifact power really quick.
It's just scenarios again? Like,
yeah, kind of. And yeah, they've sold that as... I think Garrisons is probably the worst situation ever, because Garrisons, they were like, you're going to get to build it, and immediately the impression you get is, I'm going to get to customize this shit. I'm going to, like, as an old school classic raider, I'm going to have like a Nixia and Nefarian's heads like facing each other, and then I'm going to be able to have the tail around the building, you know, I'm going to customize it. And then when we got it, it was like, well, somebody has a stables here and someone has a stables here. And that's kind of the limit of your customization that you're going to get.
Yeah, that's also why I think it's important to like have started building something before you start talking about it too much. Like, just the nature of software and game development, especially at on a team the size of the World of Warcraft team, means that until you've built most of it, you kind of don't know what it is yet.
So now we know. Our feedback on streams, forums, YouTube, whatever, it all gets back to the devs on a pretty much weekly basis. And we're going to hear far more from Josh in his own interview we'll be uploading a little bit after this goes out. I found out why things don't change. Because you guys probably have the same question, right? We're moaning about it, we're complaining about it. Why is this feature not being iterated on, developed in some way? Suggestions we're putting forward not happening. This is when I learned about modular design. Modular design is a system that's been in place for a really long time and is going to be changing. In order to find out more about this idea, we're not only going to sit down with Ian again, but we're going to sit down with Tina Wang, who's the Associate Art Director of World of Warcraft, and Morgan Day, the Associate Game Director. Over the years, you guys have fell into a habit of almost cannibalizing your own game with every patch. Yeah. Which felt very wasteful. Like, I can't imagine the R&D that went into some of these systems. Dungeons, I mean, if you go back to Kata, it was like, in Wrath, every time the TOC came out, right, every other dungeon's irrelevant now. No point in doing it. And the same with raids, and obviously there's arguments 2 and 4 linear raids. But Season 4, you've started to maybe consider, and we've actually seen this happen in a number of other MMOs recently, certainly the ones that are a decade plus, where they're like, we have a wealth of content that we've created over these years, and we've just left it. And there definitely seems to have been a lack of iteration in Blizzard. Like Garrisons. But Garrisons are remembered not fondly, unfortunately. But the premise is really good. It's just people like maybe a more cosmetic style than a practical solution. Warfronts. Yeah. How excited was the player base when Warfronts were announced? And unfortunately, it didn't go that way. The same with Island Expeditions. You know, we all watched the Sneaky Pete promise, and you're going to hate these guys, and they're going to interfere with you and stuff, and then part of the mandatory element was there. Yeah. But we can reel a list off here of huge systems, huge resources that are brought into the game, which have been left to like, okay, and class halls I would definitely put in here, which feel like such a waste. And what is the thoughts there now for like over the next few years is to change that instead of reinventing the wheel every expansion?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so there's a couple of pieces to that. Some of that is definitely the move away from, you know, expansion-specific systems that also would turn into borrowed whatever because they were going to go away, back to evergreen improvements. I think, broadly speaking, I think you could almost carve out 3 eras of World of Warcraft philosophy and development. And I would say that the first era was from Classic all the way through Mists of Pandaria, where every expansion was adding extra layers, extra systems, new professions, new races, new classes, new things. And then we kind of reached, as we were coming up on almost 10 years at that point, a turning point, arguably a little bit of a crisis, as we were coming off like 2 expansions in a row. We'd had like 12 to 13 month final tiers, and just looking at like this infinite scalability, like this infinite exponential growth of like what it takes to make an expansion, both in terms of development, but also player-facing complexity of like, how many systems do we have now? How just complicated is the game becoming? we're going to keep running this game for years and years and decades to come. Can we really just keep adding new permanent systems every couple of years forever? No. And so I think, that's what led to some of the class pruning philosophy that went into Warlords. It's what led it to kind of pulling back in some areas, but also the idea that we needed to be able to make things that were not permanent, that we could go deeper, focus them on a single expansion, have them be the hallmark of that expansion, but they weren't going to add to the ongoing complexity. That was, and so I think that was going into Warlords. And I think, as you mentioned, there were definitely some missteps with the garrisons.
Yeah.
But I think, moving ahead into Legion, it was like, well, okay, obviously we don't want something that pulls you out of the world. The class hall in some loose ways with the mission table, with some of its trappings and customization, was a little bit of a successor to the garrison system. We wanted it to be a social space where you'd see all the other people of your class. And of course, that's where we also brought in, a power component to it, artifact power, and all those systems. And it's important to bear in mind that, we're planning a couple of expansions in advance. The development cycle of an expansion is quite lengthy, from initial conception to pre-production concepting, beginning to flesh things out. So we had, we knew what the feature set for Shadowlands was going to be well before Battle for Azeroth came out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was the ongoing outgrowth of what seemed like a very successful experiment in Legion. Legion was very well received overall, very popular overall. People had nothing but praise for its systems, and so part of what the team as a whole was thinking was okay, this is a great formula for a modern expansion. That
I see the thought process now.
What is our artifacts of the next expansion? What is what are the things that are going to fill these holes that we're going to leave? Now, there are a few things that we were still blind to. I think first off was the initial excitement of oh my god, I no matter how much WoW I want to play, I can always keep progressing my character. This is awesome. I can log in on Saturdays and feel like I accomplished something, as opposed to the raid logging people were accustomed to in Warlords. That was energizing initially, but gave way to fatigue by the end of Legion, as we started to hear, complaints about AP grinding and the sense of okay, I can always be progressing my character. That means I always should be progressing my character. I don't have time for alts and
never-ending amount you can acquire.
Yes.
Versus one thing that took away in BFA was that anything you did gave you AP.
Yes, that continues. So I think, but I think again, a lot of the decisions about what BFA was going to look like were already almost completely locked in for all intents and purposes before we started to learn the lessons from Legion. And even Shadowlands was beginning to respond to, well, what didn't work in BFA. What was missing from BFA? Things like, what could the successor to the class halls be? What if there are Covenant halls? What if these are, places that have more depth and interest to them than anything we offered in BFA? But it wasn't really until we were halfway through that cycle that we started to really have concerns about, the shift that had begun all the way back in Warlords, about the modular approach that would take things away. Because people were not sad to say goodbye to their garrisons at the end of Warlords.
Shame, because if they'd been iterated on, they were potentially something amazing.
Perhaps, but the feedback, so people didn't really appreciate the extent of that pain. When BFA came out, we certainly did.
Yep.
Losing your artifacts sucked. Leaving, having all your legendaries disabled the second you hit level 115 sucked.
Not a good day getting into that alpha.
And I think, but again, at that point, we were already heavily committed on the course we were on, because we just, at some point, we have to keep marching forward. We have to keep making stuff. We can't throw out a year of work. But we started to have misgivings about that general direction. And I think realizing that the cycle we're falling into is one where every expansion begins by losing something that was awesome, leaving a hole that we then, at best, are scrambling to fill, and leave you maybe equal to where you were before. But if we screw up at all, lesser. That is not a path to success. And so that was the genesis for what I would like to think of as sort of the beginning of a third era of WoW philosophy, which begins with Dragonflight, which is trying to return to the idea of focused, evergreen things, improving baseline systems, introducing new systems into the game that we plan to carry forward, not introducing systems that we plan to throw away at the end of a year and a half or whatever. But doing so, I think, in a more sort of thoughtful way that, as you were saying much earlier, gives us some opportunities to make use of prior content, and feels like it's going to be sustainable in the years to come.
I think we're really at our best when we're looking to solve problems, right? Like when you look at Mythic Plus that was introduced in Legion. Really, the problem that we were that started from a problem. We identified a problem of like, we build these dungeons that are so beautiful, they're so epic, they're really exciting experiences, and then you stop running them after like, the first month of the game.
Well, the new idea is really cool. Mix them all the old ones back in.
Yeah, and that's another one where we're looking to really take cues from other games and really look to build off of that foundation of like such strong content of like, okay, cool, these were still fantastic dungeons.
And you're not the only ones. Like nearly every MMO we've looked at that's gone the decade plus mark is now looking back at the not only thousands of man hours, but millions of dollars that have probably been spent, and they're just like, why did we just abandon that exactly?
We're just gonna leave that there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the revelations while I've been here is this idea that you had modular design things, and they had no intention of carrying them forward, and that just feels crazy. To know that it was fully intentional. Like, I get what they're saying is like, because you start the next expansion, thinking about it, planning it in a couple of years way before, right? It doesn't quite fit into that mold, like Warfronts.
Right.
Probably don't fit into Shadowlands particularly well, so we're just going to make it and leave it behind. But as a general whole idea, do you think that's just going to go away? Like, we will look to, why are we investing time in this and not carrying it forward?
So I think there will absolutely be systems that are added to WoW that are evergreen and will continue to, move forward with us, and will continue to evolve those. But that doesn't mean that they can't change, right?
You can't think of what it's going to be in 15 years. Right? You have to say, like, let's put it out. What do people like, not like, and sort of grow it from there. And
totally.
Try and make it work. That's what I think we hope for. Because when I found out, it's like, no, it's never intended to go. I was like, you made like Sneaky Pete and this whole AI thing for islands, and it's like, yeah, but it's not going to go anywhere. So when we see that coming in, I think people will be really appreciative of that idea.
Right. And it's always fun, like you mentioned Sneaky Pete and the islands and kind of the AI that got built there. There's always, exciting opportunities when we build things like that to try to look at that as something that we could leverage for a future feature, right? Like, I've always loved the idea of like, gosh, wouldn't it be cool to add like an arena that was just played against like, AI essentially, but what if we made them really good and like, that could be pretty fun, again? Right? Like, can we like recreate some of the like BlizzCon champions, like how they're playing? That would be really fun. And like, hey, play against the BlizzCon champions. Like, what?
We did use some of the technology, right, with things like the comp stomp or Activision comp stomp. So they certainly are not arena champions that you play against. It's like basically the honor farm situation, but we try to find small ways like that.
This modular design concept is really, really important to understand how World of Warcraft is made, and it will answer a ton of questions you probably have about features that came into the game and then disappeared. Features you probably consider to be failures. Torghast, Island Expeditions, Warfronts, etc., etc. The way it works is Dragonflight is about to come out, but Dragonflight has actually been in production for 2 years. As me and you are talking right now, and no, I did not get to see anything, I intentionally closed my eyes, the next expansion is already in the works. Now they have to base what's coming out next on what they've done before and what you guys might like. The best example here is Artifact Power and Azerite Power. Ian mentioned that during Legion, they took a risk with Artifact Power, a never-ending grind, and it was met very, very well by the players. At the same time Legion's coming out and people are responding to this, Battle for Azeroth is already in production. This system is going to continue in terms of Azerite Power. That means that the guys are already building their island expeditions, these daily quests out where things will pop out to collect Azerite power. They're already building Azerite armor. This is all the stuff they're building as the natural succession to artifact weapons and artifact power. It's not until the end of Legion that people start getting annoyed with artifact power. It's an endless farm. I've been doing it now for 2 years. I'm getting frustrated by it. Oh no, our next expansion has exactly the same system in place, with more twists and turns involved in it. And there's nothing they can do about it. We've already built it. It's ready to go. We can't just scrap it and start again because it takes 2 years to make more things. This modular design concept also plays into this. Let's look at mop farms. Mop farms were super cool, but they make no sense when going into the next expansion, Warlords of Draenor. What they do though is use that technology. So we see mop farms as a cool thing that disappeared. The trick is, it was never meant to continue. What it did do is turn into garrisons. Now, garrisons contained a bit of farming and a bit more customization. Garrisons disappear. We as players see those features as failures. We look at garrisons and we say failure. Torghast, failure. We look at island expeditions, failure. And we consider them failure because they don't exist going forward. The fact of the matter is, they were never going to carry forward. Now, this leads to various problems on iteration. How much resources, if players don't like it, can you throw into a system that you know is going to be gone in several months? The answer is not a lot, because you're going to be rid of it soon anyway. That's what's going to happen, and its replacement is already being built, if not already built. So you know that you're going to get an upgraded version. This is why they utilize the technology at the back end to make the next thing better, or they hope it's going to be better. So mop farms becomes garrisons. They then use that garrison technology to create class halls. They then use the class hall technology to make covenant sanctums, using that same tech, and therefore they don't consider it a failure. But in the player's eyes, we do consider it a failure. And this is what's going to change. Instead of us constantly slotting in these Lego bricks of these various features and systems that we don't understand, like soulbinds and Netherlight Crucible, all those things that we just were like, what is this? And then it just disappears. Essences would be another example. Now we're going to look at things long term. Talent trees, we can keep that going. The new profession system, we can keep that going. And whatever else Dragonflight has in mind, there will still be some things which are expansion specific, because it does make sense that the new island expedition doesn't make sense in a Shadowlands environment, but it should be way less so, with much more care given, like other MMOs are doing, to allowing them to go forward and be iterated on and stay with the familiar for the players. This feels like it's perfectly in line with the actual gameplay core loop that you're changing. Are you worried? Because I feel like the game has been out so long now. Someone like me could look at Dragonflight and be like, heaven. I can come away for a week like I am now here with you guys. I'm not screwed.
Yeah.
I'm not screwed over. I'm not screwing my raid team or anything like that. And this is fine. But we've now got a huge amount of players who have never known World of Warcraft without logging in and having a list created for them of things that they should do. And how do you think that's going to be met with the player base once they get into an environment? It's like, choose where you want to go.
And I think the hope is, well, I mean, there's still, you can look at your world map, and there's plenty of activities, there's world quests, other events, there's things to do to raise your different renowns that you're chasing. And early on, again, for the people who aren't, like, don't have their sights set on doing high Mythic Plus or jumping in and getting into Mythic rating as soon as they can, a lot of the item level rewards from all of those systems will be very relevant. And, going and helping either, Rathian or Sibelian out the Obsidian Citadel, or otherwise, depends. It depends on how I feel on any given day.
Commit.
Coward. No.
Pick a side.
We'll see what the canon choice ends up being. But in any case, like all of those things are offering powerful rewards. It's not like we've just said there's no more reward in the game. But for the people who, the people who are focused on the hardcore stuff, who are getting, 410 plus gear from other sources, they have plenty to do. Mm-hmm. And we don't need to try to, offer them more reasons to spend more time in World of Warcraft than they're otherwise spending. And I think, all this is just there with a sense of freedom to explore it as you see fit. For some people, maybe you're going to focus on getting raid ready during the first couple of weeks, and you'll come back and check out the renown tracks later, because there are mounts or dragon riding skins or other things you want to unlock. Or again, if you're someone who's really focused on professions, there are specific recipes. If you're a leatherworker, you're going to want to, work on that centaur renown to get some of the leatherworking recipes from there. So it's all of the same philosophies are there. It's just we don't have that artifact power, that soulbind renown, that thing that is just hitting everyone over the head with being completely mandatory regardless of your playstyle. And again, that gets back to, we don't want to force players into content that they don't inherently enjoy. We want to let you play the game the way you want to play the game.
Are you far more relaxed now with it's okay if people aren't logging in week on week? If they log in just for, because you mentioned earlier, raid logging would be the prime example, but obviously in terms of logging in to do the specific thing it wants to do, because it's felt like for a good long time now, we want people online, we want WoW to be a part of their daily habits almost. By intention, your mission, even your mission board from BFA, collecting your Azerite power, whatever it might be. There's a lot of these systems seem designed to engage somebody at least on a daily basis as the norm. Are you more relaxed now with that? Probably isn't going to be. It won't be for me. Is what I would say. It's not going to be. There's other options out there that are equally as fun, and maybe less fun, but also I can jump into that experience very quickly. You've got games like Path of Exile out there that are just free.
Sure.
Not going through a great time right now, but generally speaking, the market is so flooded with this. Is this something you're adapting to, accepting, or?
I mean, all the above to an extent. I mean, I think we never want, our goal is never habit in the sense of like you have to log in when you don't want to. Our goal is for you to want to log in. Our goal is for you to want to play World of Warcraft and to look forward to getting back into the game, to have something you want to complete, something you want to chase. And if you're not wanting it, then getting you to do it despite that isn't a victory for us. It's just burning people out. And so I think giving people the freedom to feel like they can take a step away, do something in real life, play another game for a while without falling behind is valuable. I think the one thing that we do worry about when it comes to sort of the raid logging phenomenon or people taking breaks is the social nature of the game, is sort of the critical mass of keeping a group together. If the person who is really excited to log in to do things with their guildmates logs in and no one from their guild is online because of whatever reason, and then they just log back off kind of disappointed because they were hoping to play with friends but their friends weren't around, that can be an issue. And I think that's something, going back to WoD, to Warlords of Draenor, that was probably the peak of the raid logging era, where really there was other than checking your garrison, if it wasn't raid night, there was nothing to do. It wasn't, because Myth Plus didn't even exist back then.
As well, go in, look at all 10 of your characters, or I think it was 10 at the time.
And so that felt like a step too far toward that end of the spectrum. But ultimately, as long as we're keeping social groups somewhat healthy, we want people to be able to play the game in the way that makes them happiest.
Excellent. This is all very positive,
right?
Yeah,
it seems like it should. It's kind of a no-brainer, but
no, I mean that's the experience I've had, and I've been on some mystical quest now, like Kung Fu, is like trying all these different experiences. Like the main thing I'm seeing is they just create experiences that you want to log in for, you don't have to log in for, which is what I remember from World of Warcraft.
There's a player base of millions of folks who've said, we like this game, we've chosen to make this our home. We ignore them at our folly. Like, what do they want? What do they not want?
I think that's enough about gameplay. Dragonflight is changing so much. This mandatory content that we've been burdened with for the last 8 years is going away. There'll still be some stuff, and that's basically them wanting you to be excited about it. Come and check it out, see what it's like, but then you can leave it alone. It's more of an introduction than anything else, and I think that's a fair balance that they've struck. But now we need to move on to a more sensitive subject. The elephant in the room. Sexual allegations against Blizzard has been a prominent subject around the world. It's still ongoing, with lawsuits still pending. But let's find out what they've done to change things internally.
A frat boy culture. That is how Activision-Blizzard is now being described here in this new lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing. The state agency alleges that female employees there are subjected to sex discrimination, unlawful sexual harassment, retaliation, and unequal pay.
Let's get into a few ground rules of this subject because it's a little sensitive, and investigations are still ongoing and probably will be ongoing for a while, which means we can't dive into specifics. We're simply not allowed. I'm also not a journalist. I am not the person who should be diving into this stuff. There are lawyers and things working on this currently to find out exactly what happened and make sure the right people are compensated. We know certain things have happened at Blizzard. We are fully aware that they have done a complete equity paycheck on every single employee in the business, making sure that person A doing the same job as person B are being paid exactly the same amount for doing that job. We know that has taken place and people are very happy with it. What we're going to do is give Blizzard the platform. We're going to ask the question of what their goal is overall. What is their philosophy overall to make sure things like this never happen again? Amongst all the Dragonflight changes that have come from the last 7 years of expansions, it's been so changed, but you've also had so much, and we've got to get into this, is like so much upheaval internally with COVID. We obviously had all the harassment stuff that came through and massive changes amongst the staff. Like, how have you dealt with that in terms of dealing with the motivation of the staff, the internal environment, and then pushing forward with an entirely new philosophy on the game for Dragonflight? It's got to have been a rough couple of years.
It's definitely been a challenging couple of years, but I think the team today is stronger and more tight-knit than we've ever been, having come through that and having weathered it. I mean, COVID in 2020 was obviously, threw the whole world for a loop, to say the least, and began a process for us of relearning a lot of sort of lifelong creative and collaborative processes of, how do you have what used to be the casual conversation around a whiteboard, or bouncing ideas off your office mate.
To talk about it yesterday, it's like it's very, very strange, and in the creative environment, that's really hard. And you've done Shadowlands and Dragonflight in this new place, so it's got to have been for you, who's leading the charge. It's like, okay, this is a lot of challenges to face.
I think it's been resolving some problems and figuring out systems and processes that work, and a lot of I think a lot of what we've come up with, we would keep regardless, even if we could all come back to the office tomorrow. There are certain meetings that we would have that we'd keep virtual forever. I think it is, it's the social connections, it's the casual interactions that are the hardest to reproduce, but we continue to work at it. And then obviously the other, major event last year, I think really it triggered a period of ongoing self-reflection for the team as a whole, for the company as a whole. Starting last summer, it was both, looking inward to our culture, to our history, to, frankly ask, like, are we who the internet says we are? Is this who we really are? And I think the answer we came to is no, but also certainly it's who we never want to be and want to have no chance of being. And so how do we change our processes? How do we develop a culture of feedback and listening and openness and trust that makes sure that even the slightest hint of impropriety will be raised and dealt with before we ever got any place close to the allegations from years and years ago? But at the same time, we were also listening to our player base and kind of re-examining, we were hearing lots of feedback, not just about anger at the revelations in the lawsuits, but about the state of the game.
Yep. It was a double whammy.
Your I'm quitting video very much included. Of like, we're missing something big here, right? Our goal at the end of the day is to make a world that players want to spend time in, that they're going to love spending time in, and that's the passion that drives all of us. And we're failing.
This is the third day we've been here on the Blizzard campus, and it's a strange, strange place. It's huge. 7 giant buildings housing Overwatch over there. They're doing World of Warcraft in there. They're doing WoW Classic over there. It's a weird, weird environment to be in because there's nobody here. Blizzard has been running about 15% staff on site since Shadowlands, since COVID kicked in, and it doesn't plan on changing. People that are here generally come in for 1 or 2 days a week. The rest of the time they work from home. And all across California, to the other gaming companies we've spoken to this week, that is going to stay exactly like that.
The last 4 years have been really tumultuous for you guys. We've had COVID, and walking around yesterday, wonderful access to see everything and see how it works, but desolate. Very strange, an eerie feeling, because everything is designed for so much fun. Yeah, well, today's an anomaly, and I know that. I've been told that many times by the comms team. They're like, it's not like this. We've not set this up. These aren't paid actors to give it some life. But we did the full tour yesterday. Everything you guys have set up for all the staff is so fun. Like, they're very creative in their places. Seeing the team, the staff just playing volleyball at lunch, that's exactly why we're here. No one sees that, right? Yeah. That's what they don't know happens. Yeah. But obviously then the allegations come out, huge shake up at the top. And you guys are the ones who steered that ship, as far as I know. So we need to know, how did you do that? You came into a really rough patch, and then you seemingly have got here. So,
well, I mean, as you pointed out, I mean, who could have predicted the last couple of years? I mean, just having COVID and having to work from home, and we literally mobilized like within a couple of days. It's like, okay, everyone, there's a lockdown happening. You need to go home to be safe. And, we're going to make sure you have equipment. And, then we literally went through a cycle of getting everyone machines. That alone was a big deal, to deal with. And certainly, the issues that we faced as a company and even as our team felt very strongly about, hey, we're going to send our message out to our players. We want them to know where we stand and what we want to be, as a team. And, I'm really proud of how much nobody on the team got defensive. Nobody said, oh, but this, that, or the other, and said, no, okay, this is a wake up call for us. This is something that we have to ingrain in our culture and reinforce. And we've grown as a team, and as new players come onto our team, we want to make sure that they are safe, that they understand what our values are, and that, we want our game to be inclusive and diverse. Because after all, our audience it's around the globe. I'm going to throw one thing at you because I also oversee the Warcraft franchise.
Yes.
In our 28-year history, we've accumulated 250 million players in Warcraft. Around 250 million players.
It's crazy when you see the number, right?
It's nuts, right?
It just seems unrealistic.
You think of how big that is, and it's important that the team that is making the game and the content that's in that game reflects that diverse audience, and that's something that this team has embraced wholeheartedly, and it's been great. It's been great to see, and letting our game and our team speak for us, and what we stand for. I've never been through that kind of experience before, especially making games, which I think a lot of people think of as kind of trivial entertainment, or at least they did when I first got started with it. And now it's an important part of people's lives.
No, I totally get that, and I can't say I've never seen a happier workforce besides mine, obviously. No, everybody's been super happy.
Feel free to speak candidly if you don't agree.
But it generally has felt that way being here, because that's exactly why I asked to do this. I watched the latest couple of interviews. The Dragonflight announcement I really disliked because it was very glossy and shiny. I was like, this isn't gamers. It's not us. Who are you talking to? And then you get here and it's like, this is the reality. Chilling out, shouting, playing volleyball, and doing all those kind of things. And I think you should be proud of what you've done, because unless you're all like it's a North Korea thing going on out there, everyone seems pretty happy.
The stories that came out over that time were absolutely horrific, and they're still ongoing, which is why the guys couldn't say much. No woman working anywhere should feel that way, and this is an industry-wide problem that we're seeing all over the place and hopefully is being addressed. Blizzard themselves are doing what they can, making sure that the lines of communication are open, and the message has been absolutely loud and clear. We spoke to people off camera, on camera about this, and that message was simple. This can never, ever happen again. They can't afford to have it happen again, and they don't want to be associated with that kind of environment, and they're trying to move forward as a team, and as Ian said, they don't want to be the people the internet says they are. They don't want that at all. And it's nice to see that during the stages that the staff did, that John Hight was out there supporting them as well. The new leadership is a big part of why we went. Fresh blood in. We've had Holly come in, Mike Ibarra come in, and we have Microsoft potentially coming in the future, who are all addressing this issue to make lives better for themselves. And we hope for that to be there. In total, Activision-Blizzard has laid off 37 staff, reprimanded a further 40 plus. I can't predict the future, and it's not my place to do so. I can't talk to everybody at Blizzard, and the fact is, as was pointed out to us several times, is the fact that people can now work from home has given them a safety net to be able to speak out as quickly as possible if something is going wrong. What the future holds is on Blizzard. And so we'll pay attention to these ongoing lawsuits, what's going on, and what they're doing with. But I can tell you this, and I'm okay with saying this. What I saw while I was there was extremely happy people. Obviously, not everybody's there, but that's what I saw. The only times that Blizzard asked us to turn our cameras around was when the staff were squealing with delight at seeing other employees. They've been apart for so long, and they love working there, and they love the other people they work with. We've heard from other sources that you will see in other interviews coming out later that the rumors and reports are that things are much, much, much better at Blizzard itself, especially in the Warcraft team, and they're all working to make things good for them. That's what we know, but it's up to them to prove it. The other thing I want to discuss is, why did we go? Why did we do this? Why did I pay to send me and another member of my staff all this equipment over across the other side of the world in order to see Blizzard? When I left, I was about as deeply upset about a video game as I'd ever been. World of Warcraft provided me so much, and I had to say goodbye. But I felt we owed them another chance. And what was really interesting is that the top execs at Blizzard, not just in regards to me, but in regards to you guys as well who may have left, felt the same way.
WoW, when it first came out, I mean, Facebook was only at Harvard. It hadn't yet hit the rest of the world. And for a lot of people, social interaction through the chat of WoW and logging in on WoW was one of their first experiences in being around a bunch of other people and exchanging ideas. Even though the premise is we're playing this game together, but we're also having meaningful discourse. And I think that we want to see that we're doing the same thing 5 and 10 years from now that we did back then.
Especially because seemingly when I stopped making regular content, I mean, you guys, not directly, but World of Warcraft gave me a career. I've traveled the world with my children because of World of Warcraft, and to leave that behind was devastating. Like, to the point where I could not play this game anymore. That's where I was at. I can't even fathom logging into play anymore. Nope. We met in 15 years ago when you were in Molten Core.
Wow.
He was just a raider in Molten Core, in my Molten Core guild. And we disconnected for a decade. And then, because I was streaming and stuff, he was like, "Is that Mike?" Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and now he works for me, and we're all doing very well. So I owe all that to. So it's like leaving it behind was devastating. And then I see Dragonflight's coming out, and I kind of got the message. We kind of changed everything that you were moaning about. Come have a look. I was like, okay. And then I came in. I was skeptical. I was a pessimist. I was like, it's here somewhere. There's Azerite power under this table. I know there is. It's lurking. And it's like, no, it's not there. So that's when I watched the last interview with Ian and Max. I was like, this ain't right. Let's send a message. Can we come? Can we do something that's casual, relaxed, a conversation? Instead of like, here's 20 questions. Go. Right, I'm going.
Yep.
I field all requests.
So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.
Thank you very much. You've
Glad
been
you've
wonderful, both of you.
returned.
Yeah, thanks for not giving up on us.
Yeah.
How can I? I agree with you guys.
The sun is setting on our time here at Blizzard for now, and this video. Everything we were promised, we were given. Unprecedented access. We got to go absolutely everywhere. We were well taken care of. We got to look at everything, and it's hard not to be impressed with the changes in leadership and the direction that they're going with this game. I can't promise what's going to be here in the next 5 years. What I can tell you is, as I'm talking to you right now, a meeting has been going on since 5 a.m. discussing where World of Warcraft will be in the next 10 years. They're duly focused on new things. It's Era 3 is what they're calling it. It's going to be a big change from everything we've seen since Legion, since Classic. They're going in a different way, and they're going to see how people like it, and they're going to adapt. Everything they've told us is that they're listening to player fluid feedback. The game is going to be dictated far more by what players want to do. The idea of modular content will remain, but now they're looking to make content that is far more evergreen. Features added in Dragonflight should still have relevance 3 expansions down the road, not just left to the bin like Warfronts, Island Expeditions, Torghast, Garrisons, the list goes on, class halls, which have all been fan favorites, some of them less so, but then just disappeared every single time, which was by design in the past. That's going to change. They're going to look at it in a different way. It's worth a look, and it's worth checking out because their intentions seem very, very pure. I'm super happy with what we found here. I couldn't have asked for more. I couldn't have asked for more time, and I'm glad we came, and I'm glad we did this. Thank you for coming along for this journey, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.